Hi, I'm Hayley and I teach history at HNC. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about Henry VIII and we're going to look at whether he was a Catholic, a Protestant or just desperate for an heir. So things you might already know about Henry VIII. He was the second son of Henry VII. He was the king who famously broke England away from the Catholic Church of Rome. And he was obsessed with having a baby boy. So a couple of things you might know. So we're going to have a look at some evidence as to whether he was Catholic or Protestant, see what that evidence tells us and see if you guys can make a judgment at the end of it. So I'm going to start with what was happening in 1529. It was an incredibly busy year for Henry VIII. So Henry VIII had decided that his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, who was a Spanish princess, was kind of illegal in his mind, that he should never have been allowed to marry her because she had been married to his brother. And he found a religious text that basically said, you shouldn't do that. He therefore told the Pope that. The Pope said, I don't care. You're married, you stay married. He around this time as well fell in love with a woman called Anne Boleyn and wanted very much to have a son. His relationship with Catherine had only provided him with a daughter called Mary. Around this time as well, Charles V, the most powerful man in Europe, took control of Rome. And this put the Pope under the control of Charles. Now, Charles was also Catherine of Aragon's nephew. And therefore, he basically told the Pope, yeah, maybe don't give that annulment for the marriage. Thanks very much. This all led to a big trial in 1529 in London at Blackfriars, where Henry really hoped he was going to get his annulment, but basically it was a disaster. Catherine made a beautiful speech that made her really sympathetic, stormed out, and the Pope said, I'm going to sort this out in Rome. End of kind of issue. That was happening in 1529. Bit complicated. So a lot of people argue when we look at this as to whether that England was always going to go Protestant, that the church in England wasn't working, the Catholic Church was corrupt. So we're just going to have a quick look about whether that's true, as to whether England actually was ready to kind of change religion in 1529. So a lot of things suggest that actually the church was really strong. We had a beautiful picture on the far left. You can see there is Louth Spire in Lincolnshire. Very exciting. It is the tallest church parish spire in England, paid for by all the people of Louth with their own money, which tells you how much they loved their church. And the amount of money people were spending on things like effigies. You can see the tomb there of Henry VII and his wife Elizabeth. The beautiful ornate paintings you'd see in churches kind of all suggest that actually people were very religious. They believed in things. They paid lots of money to show how Catholic they were. We also got a couple of examples here of like the beautiful paintings of saints, which is a Catholic belief on the left there, and the importance of what is called Mass to Catholics. If you know anything about this, Catholics believe that the bread and the wine you eat transform literally into the body and blood of Christ, and this is something that Protestants kind of don't believe in. So we also have the emergence at this time of what we call Protestants or Lutherans. There was a Lutheran Reformation in what is now Germany at this time. However, this wasn't really getting to England. So by 1529, you only had a small amount of Lutheran influence. And the man you can see on the left there is Martin Luther, and the man on the right is William Tyndale, an English Lutheran who did actually translate the Bible into English, which at this time would get you burned. So not a good thing to do. They were also, you could see at this time, actually the church and the government working to burn heretics, like I just suggested, which again suggests that the government and the people were not interested in kind of changing religion. We also need to consider like how Catholic was Henry. Was he not a Catholic? Was he a Catholic? What did he believe at this time? So this is a copy of a book that he wrote, which was kind of going against Martin Luther's kind of trashing of the Catholic Church, called In Defense of the Seven Sacraments. So in 1521, Henry VIII was coming out and saying, I am the most Catholic person in the world, basically. He also had to use the Pope to be able to marry Catherine in 1502 in the first place. And like the popes were generally supportive of the kings of England, they helped them and they helped keep social control. We also have on the left here a prayer roll, which Henry used personally and showed how religious he was, that he was like handwriting it. And historian David Starkey argues that this is enough evidence that Henry was Catholic. But other historians, like George Bernard, argue that actually Henry was a bit funny about certain aspects of Catholicism. So he didn't like things like pilgrimages, which is where you would go to an important religious site like Canterbury, which had the shrine of Thomas Becket, a saint, which you might know about if you did this at Key Stage 3 history. And yeah, he didn't seem to like this kind of thing, despite the fact that actually he had an eternal candle lit there for his dead baby son. So there is a bit of an argument with historians there. So we get in 1533 a break from Rome. So why? Why does Henry do this if he's a Catholic and if the people of England are like, we're fine, we don't want change? So the Leviticus text that Henry used to say I should not be married to Catherine is on the left there. And basically it's described as a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Henry wanted to divorce or to annul his marriage to Catherine, and there was no way out of it. As I talked about earlier, he had no other options. The Pope had said no, and therefore the only way possibly was to break from the Catholic Church. Yeah, and so whether that is the biggest reason, if it's just about the annulment. And yeah, the book of Leviticus which was not strong enough to convince the Pope to annul the marriage. And the Pope said, I can't do it. So 1536, however. So if Henry is a Catholic and England's pretty much Catholic and he's broken from Rome to get his annulment, which he gets, he marries Anne Boleyn. But then in 1536, Catherine dies and also Anne Boleyn is executed for various things that year. Why does he not go back to the Catholic Church, basically, which does suggest that there is some kind of religious motives. And this is the argument that Henry had actually come to believe that he was head of the church. And this was by a beautiful collection made by the lovely Thomas Cranmer called the Collectiana Satis Copiosa, that was historical evidence showing that kings of England had always been heads of the church. And that therefore Henry had this epiphany in 1531 that says, do you know what, I'm head of the church. I don't need to go back to the Pope. Parliament, as we know now, with things looming, is the fact that it's changed because of this event forever and ever, and it's the tool to get the Reformation going. So basically, all these laws that you'll see passed, which I'm not going to go into detail, these are the laws that break England from the Catholic Church of Rome. They make England its own, having its own religion, and it made them completely independent, and this is how it remains today. And as I said, this changed the use of Parliament forever. So as well as just making religious change, it changed how our country works completely. So was it a real Reformation then, or was it just kind of like a fake one to get Henry power? We have Catholicism without the Pope. We have some aspects that remain, some that don't. So Henry brings back certain things that are very, very Catholic, like creeping to the cross and confession. We have a very traditional act passed in 1539, making England quite Catholic. And we have the persecution of people that disagree with things like that the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ. So there's a lot of evidence that actually Henry is very, very Catholic. And that therefore he's only kind of broken from Rome because it suits him for kind of power and his annulment. Another reason perhaps why Henry did this is how he thought about himself. He kind of thought himself as this great reformer who was bringing awesome things to the people of England. The picture here is a copy of the Great Bible from 1539, and it shows Henry dispatching the Bible to Cromwell and Cranmer, the men that brought in the Reformation. This changed the church, and the people kind of getting it from below. So him as like this beautiful, perfect king distributing change to the lovely people of England. He saw himself as like, yeah, a King David. So what was Henry VIII? Was he a Catholic who condemns the Pope, dislikes purgatory, but sees aspects of it as superstition? Was he a Protestant who says, but I don't like certain aspects of it? That he doesn't like, so justification by faith, but allowing people to read the Bible? Or was he kind of somewhere in the middle, that it kind of flicks between the two, where he just does what is the best thing at the time? Historian Peter Marshall maybe argues it the best. He says, the wonderful thing about Tiggers is I'm the only one. So maybe Henry VIII is just not anything. He's just him, and he did changes that were based on many different things. If you want to learn any more about this, which is a very complex but interesting period of history, there's some books on the left there. You're welcome to pause and have a look at those. I really recommend the John Guy one for a nice, easy introduction to the Tudors. Thanks very much for watching this video. If you need any more information, please go onto their website. Thank you so much.